Have you ever wondered, why is Russia walking a diplomatic tightrope? Russia finds itself balancing competing interests as the Israel-Hamas war unfolds. Moscow calls for an immediate end to the fighting while carefully avoiding placing blame on either side. Welcome back, everyone. I am the Masked Woman, and today's video will take you into a story that may catch you off guard. Has Russia subtly shifted toward Palestine? Russia now appears to be leaning more openly toward the Palestinian cause. President Vladimir Putin argues that the current war erupted because the world failed to establish an independent Palestinian state, as outlined in UN resolutions, a failure he calls a deep injustice. He also stresses that Israeli settlement expansion has only intensified the crisis. Before we continue, if you're new here, make sure to hit the bell icon so you never miss any of the stories we uncover on this channel. Moscow's careful positioning is shaped by decades of ties with Israel, the Palestinians, and other players across the Middle East. By presenting itself as a neutral mediator, Russia hopes to expand its diplomatic reach in the region. At the same time, the Kremlin uses this conflict to criticize U.S. policies, suggesting that Washington is distracted by its support for Ukraine while failing to address the roots of the Middle East crisis. In Europe, political tensions are also rising. On October 25, 2023, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz attended a cabinet meeting in Berlin, while in Moscow, human rights advocate Oleg Orlov appeared in court earlier that month. Orlov, a leading figure in the Nobel Prize-winning organization Memorial, was fined roughly $1,500 for allegedly discrediting the Russian military after criticizing Moscow's actions in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the German government approved new measures aimed at speeding up deportations of rejected asylum seekers. Beyond Europe, Russia's diplomacy extends to Asia. On September 13, 2023, Putin met North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the Vostochny Cosmodrome in Russia's Far East. Soon after, North Korea lashed out at South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, mocking his warnings about growing Russia-North Korea military cooperation. Analysts believe increased rail activity along the North Korea-Russia border suggests that Moscow may be receiving military supplies. How is Russia interpreting the current war? President Putin argues that the current conflict stems partly from what he sees as Washington's failed attempts at peacemaking. According to him, the United States poured money into the region without addressing the fundamental issue of Palestinian statehood. He insists that the fighting must be brought to an immediate halt and urges both Israel and Hamas to avoid harming civilians, warning that further escalation could lead to serious consequences. Russia is also trying to keep doors open with both sides. The wording from Putin and other Kremlin officials is intentionally measured, reflecting Moscow's desire to maintain functional ties with Israel while also supporting Palestinian demands. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov highlighted the importance of engaging with both parties, saying that only a balanced approach would allow Russia to play a constructive mediating role. At the same time, Moscow is not hiding the fact that the conflict shifts global attention, particularly away from Ukraine, which could weaken Western backing for Kyiv. Peskov even took a jab at Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, suggesting he might envy the renewed U.S. focus on Israel. How has Russia's Middle East strategy changed over time? In the Cold War era, the Soviet Union stood firmly with the Palestinians and their Arab partners, offering both political backing and military assistance against Israel. After the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, Moscow even broke off diplomatic relations with Israel altogether. Yet just before the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev reversed course and re-established diplomatic ties with Israel, a major turning point in Soviet foreign policy. Following the collapse of the USSR, Russia's global role shrank as the country dealt with internal turmoil and economic decline. When Vladimir Putin came to power, he sought to rebuild Russia's influence across the Middle East while still maintaining pragmatic relations with Israel. Moscow also joined the Middle East Quartet, alongside the United States, the European Union, and the United Nations, though it never matched Washington's level of involvement. A major shift occurred in 2015 when Russia teamed up with Iran to support Syrian President Bashar al-Assad during the Syrian civil war. By deploying troops and air power, Russia helped Assad reclaim much of the country and reasserted itself as a decisive player in regional politics. Let's dive into a pressing question. Since the breakup of the Soviet Union, Russia and Israel have steadily built stronger economic, political, and security connections. More than 1 million Russian-speaking immigrants resettled in Israel, creating a cultural and social bridge both governments often highlight as a cornerstone of their relationship. Despite Israel's repeated airstrikes targeting Iranian assets positioned near Russian forces in Syria, the broader relationship between Moscow and Tel Aviv remained surprisingly steady. Tensions flared briefly in 2018 when Syrian air defenses accidentally shot down a Russian aircraft during an Israeli operation, but the fallout was contained. The war in Ukraine placed unprecedented pressure on the relationship. Israel expressed sympathy for Ukraine, but declined to send weapons. Putin's remarks labeling President Zelensky, who is Jewish, as a neo-Nazi were deeply offensive to many Israelis. At the same time, Putin praised Israel's attempts to serve as a mediator. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defended his decision not to arm Kyiv by stressing the need to maintain security coordination with Russia in Syria and prevent Israeli technology from ending up in Iranian hands. How have Russia-Palestine relations been rebuilt? During the Cold War, the Soviet Union stood as one of the strongest supporters of the Palestinian movement, providing military assistance, political backing, and economic aid. After the USSR collapsed, this relationship faded as Russia turned inward to deal with its own instability. But under President Putin, Moscow made deliberate efforts to rebuild its influence. Trade and military cooperation exist, albeit cautiously. Russia has hosted Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas on multiple occasions, signaling a desire to re-establish close ties. At the same time, Moscow has kept communication channels open with Hamas. In September 2022, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow, underscoring Russia's intent to speak with all major Palestinian factions. Why are Russia and Iran growing closer? In the years following Iran's 1979 revolution, Tehran was openly critical of the Soviet Union. But as Iran's tensions with Western countries intensified, Moscow gradually became a crucial strategic partner. Russia went on to construct Iran's first nuclear power plant and expanded cooperation as both nations backed Bashar al-Assad during the Syrian civil war. The partnership deepened even further during the Ukraine conflict. Iran supplied Russia with Shahed drones, which Moscow deployed against Ukrainian infrastructure. Reports suggest that Russia shared drone expertise with Iran and helped establish a joint production facility. In return, Iran is expected to receive advanced Russian fighter jets and other modern military systems, signaling an even closer defense relationship. What other regional partnerships has Russia developed? Russia has also deepened its ties with Saudi Arabia, a key rival of Iran, as part of its broader push to widen its influence across the Middle East. Even though Moscow and Riyadh backed different factions during the Syrian conflict, their political and economic cooperation has grown steadily. President Putin and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have cultivated a notably close working relationship. This partnership played a major role in shaping the OPEC+ agreement to reduce oil production, a move that helped drive global oil prices upward and underscored Russia's leverage in global energy markets. Where does Russia stand today in the Middle East? By the end of 2025, Russia's role in the Middle East has become even more defined. Moscow continues to voice strong support for the creation of an independent Palestinian state, insisting that genuine peace cannot be achieved without recognizing Palestinian sovereignty. At the same time, its strategic partnership with Iran has grown significantly, solidified through the 2025 Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty. This agreement expands their cooperation in areas such as energy, security, nuclear development, and advanced military technology. Is Russia using the conflict to its advantage? Although Russia avoids entering the conflict directly, it leverages these alliances to position itself as a major power broker in the region. Through this approach, Moscow seeks to counter U.S. influence and establish new geopolitical pressure points that effectively draw Western attention away from the war in Ukraine. That brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this breakdown, remember to like the video and subscribe so you never miss future uploads. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.